the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Israel. It's the epicenter of geopolitical problems and conflicts, and has been for a long time. God says, thus said the Lord God, this is Jerusalem. I have set her at the center of the nations with lands around her. The city of Jerusalem, the old city, the Temple Mount itself, is the epicenter of geopolitical controversy and always is. All right, if we go back in time, all the way back to Genesis 9:18 in the scriptural text, you see the Jebusites. The Jebusites are living in the land when King David comes there. Noah's grandson, all right, Shem, and Noah had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They got on the ark with the parents. When they get off the ark, Ham is the father of Canaan. These were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Jebus is one of the grandsons of Noah, one of the sons of Canaan. Another list here. This is from AmazingBibleTimeline.com. Genesis 10:15. The first time the name Jebusites appear in the Bible as one of the descendants of Canaan. Joshua 10, Jerusalem is mentioned in the Bible. And this is where some of the Jebusites along with others go and fight against Joshua. Joshua 11:3, Numbers 13:29, the Jebusites. Joshua 11:3, Numbers 13:29, the Jebusites dwell in the hill country. Genesis 15:18-21, the Jebusites are listed as one of the clans that inhabit land that is promised to Abram. Exodus 3:6, God rescued the people of Moses from the Egyptians and brought them to the good and spacious land abundant with milk and honey, where the Jebusites resisted along with 5 other tribes. Exodus 33:2, God sent an angel to move out the 6 tribes, including the Jebusites, from the promised land. Deuteronomy 7, God ordered the Israelites to completely destroy the Jebusites together with the other mighty nations. Judges 1:21, you find that Jebusites still live in Jerusalem with the Benjamites. Judges 1:8, Jerusalem was captured by the people of Judah. Joshua 15:63, Judah failed to expel the Jebusites from Jerusalem, and they continued to live in the city with the children of Judah. Judges 19:10, Jerusalem, also known as Jebus. 2 Samuel 5:6 and following. The Jebusites protested against King David's arrival in Jerusalem. But David invaded Zion, Jerusalem, lived in its stronghold, and called it the city of David. Next, we see the command from God. Now, this is a whole issue, and it brings up theological and ethical problems for people, but God commanded the Jews to drive out the Canaanites. Let me say, first of all, it's God's earth. He created it. He can do with it what he wants. He can give it to whomever he likes. He gave it to the Jews. But the Jews had to earn it. They had to go do battle. Why did God command them to wipe out the Canaanites? These people were pagans, ungodly, rebellious against the Creator God. They made their sons pass through the fire. As the text says, they worshiped the different gods, Molech, Chemosh, Tiamat, and others, instead of worshiping the one true Creator God. And God had had enough of their paganism, idolatry, killing of young ones, the most innocent and weak among them, the ones that really needed their protection and help. And God was done with that, so he sent that land on along. But again, the Israelites had to earn it still, but also even we're going to see David purchased Mount Moriah. Then you have this. And the Lord said to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, say to the people of Israel, when you pass over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you and destroy all their figured stones, destroy all their molten images, and demolish all their high places, and you shall take possession of the land and settle in it. For I have given the land to you to possess it. You shall inherit the land by lot, according to your families. To a large tribe you shall give a large inheritance, to a small tribe you shall give a small inheritance. Wherever the lot falls to any man, that shall be his. According to the tribes of your fathers you shall inherit. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then those of them whom you let remain shall be as pricks in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they shall trouble you in the land where you dwell. And I will do to you as I thought to do to them. Numbers 33, 50 to 56. The incomplete obedience that took place during the conquest of Joshua left pockets of Canaanites surviving. Judges 1. The pagan influences of these peoples on the Jews was the cause of much later degradation of the worship of God of Israel. Some of the kings of Judah, Solomon was the first, incorporated pagan rites and rituals into the worship of Yahweh. To their credit, a few kings of Judah, such as Josiah, about 630 BC, removed these high places and restored the first temple to its prescribed furnishings and forms of service and worship. That's from the website templemount.org. From the same website, templemount.org. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and walked in the ways of David his father, and he did not turn aside to the right or to the left. Okay, he began to seek the God of his father David. And he purged Judah and Jerusalem in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali and their ruins round about. He broke down the altars, beat the Asherim and the images into powder, and hewed down all the incense altars throughout all the land of Israel. 2 Chronicles 34. Let's back up before this time of Joshua and the conquest, though, and think about Abraham for a moment, because this is where the ownership, the residency of the Jewish people really began. Abraham and Mount Moriah, he said, "Take now your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you." Then they came to the place of which God had told him, and Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood and bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Genesis 22. This is the rock. Inside of that gold dome building you see on top of the Temple Mount, all these images you see of Jerusalem, the gold dome building there on your media outlets. Inside of that is this rock. Now, I've been in here before. There is a tall wooden fence all around it last time I went in there. But here's an earlier picture with this tapestry hanging over it. But this is the rock. This is literally pretty much all that's underneath that building. It is a rock. There's a rock there. And actually, the time I went in there, you could go around one end of it, and there's a cave underneath that rock. I've been down inside that cave as well. But this is the rock. This is Mount Moriah. This is the top of the hill. This is where Abraham, in obedience to God, was about to sacrifice Isaac. Okay, God told him to do that. This is what scriptural text teaches, and it is really a perfect picture of substitute, because if you read on in the text, okay, the angel of God, the angel stops Abraham before he sticks the dagger in, and he says, "I see now that you're willing to obey me and follow me, truly the Creator God, the God who speaks." And so he shows Abraham a ram caught in some bushes or whatever. Abraham goes and slaughters the ram and offers it for the sacrifice. So that's a beautiful picture of a substitute. And we're going to see later in the progress of Revelation in the New Testament, you see John the Baptist, for instance, saying, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." John 1:29, referring to Jesus. He is the Lamb of God. He is going to be the substitute. 2 Corinthians 5:21. He, God, made him, Jesus, who knew no sin, to be sin on our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him. That's the only way you attain the righteousness of God, or that God sees you as righteous. It's through the cloak of Christ's righteousness. It's because you have placed your personal faith in Jesus' death on the cross and his resurrection from the dead as the payment for your sin, as your substitute. And we see that picture way back in Genesis 22. And so we see the painting of Caravaggio, where Abraham is being stopped by the angel from making the sacrifice. Now, on top of that rock, you have this image here. It's an overlay where the dome of the rock, now in between there was the Solomonic and Herodian temple, but over top of the rock, the modern day gold dome building is built over top of that rock. And then the future millennial temple as well will be built over top of that as well. The Solomonic and Herodian temple were built over top of the rock as well, same as the Dome of the Rock. Okay, so where are we so far in the history of the Temple Mount? God promised Abraham the land. There were Canaanites living there, specifically in Jerusalem. They were called Jebusites. Joshua did not kick all the Jebusites out. The Israelites did not kick them out. So you still have the Jebusites there in the time of David, 10th century BC. And here's what happens next. However, the king said to Araunah, "No, but I will surely buy it from you for a price, for I will not offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God, which cost me nothing." So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver, 2 Samuel 24. So that's the last chapter in 2 Samuel. And there's a parallel passage in Chronicles. At any rate, you go on to see the history in the book of Kings. You see that David's son Solomon builds the temple. God would not allow David to build the temple. He would allow him to make preparations and raise the funds for it, purchase the real estate for it. David purchased the real estate to build the temple. Solomon, however, was allowed to build the temple. David had blood on his hands. God was not going to allow him to do it, but he would allow his son Solomon to build the temple. Look at the Temple Mount. You know, this knoll sticks up there, Mount Moriah. That's where the temple, Abraham offered Isaac. It's where Solomon's temple would be built. It is where the Zerubbabel temple would be built. The temple's still there in Herod's day, Jesus' time, destroyed by the Romans, 70 A.D. The Dome of the Rock built on top of that knoll in the 7th century, 6th, 7th century, and still there today. 2 Samuel 24:24. So David bought the threshing floor for 50 shekels. David built there an altar to the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. Thus the Lord was moved by prayer for the land, and the plague was held back from Israel. You should read that narrative sometime as well. Some great lessons to learn there from God's Word. Archaeological evidence for King David. The Tel Dan Stela was one of the inscriptions mentioned in an Aramaic inscribed stela found in 1993 and 1994 by Avraham Biran at Tel Dan in northern territory of Israel. Most believe it was originally erected as a memorial inscription by Syria's King Hazael, 1 Kings 1915, in the 9th to 8th century BC, to boast of his military campaigns over Israel. It's possible that the stela commemorates Hazael's campaign against Jehu, 2 Kings 10:32, and it is probable that Dan was part of the territory that Jehu lost. So this is clear and strong archaeological evidence of the Davidic dynasty there in the 10th and 9th century BC. Not only that, you have the Moabite stone, or the Mesha stela, 9th century BC, discovered in the biblical city of Dibon in 1868. The smooth portions of the stela are reconstructions of the text based on the paper impressions taken of the original inscription before it was actually shattered into pieces at one point in history, and I think that was done on purpose because of some squabble between people trying to buy or sell it, something like that. You can certainly fact check me on that as to why it got broken. At any rate, great archaeological evidence here for the Davidic dynasty. Geisler and Holden say about the Mesha stela, it's written in the first person by King Mesha and is the longest monumental inscription yet recovered in Jordan, though parts of the text have been reconstructed. Originally, the stela was complete, but due to later unfortunate circumstances in the negotiations with Bedouin to secure the artifact, it was smashed in separate pieces. Fortunately, an impression of the stone inscription was made by Charles Clermont-Ganneau prior to these events. The value of the stone is seen in the damaged portion of line 31 of the inscription. Through an analysis of the paper impression and the stone itself, which is housed at the Louvre Museum in France by epigrapher André Lemaire, a reconstructed translation reveals yet another House of David phrase, Bet David. Okay, so interesting. Another is an 8th century stamp seal impression, a bulle, that confirms David's dynasty. It mentions Yehucal, who is mentioned in Jeremiah 38. You can dig into that for yourself at some point. Then there's also the Taylor prism or the Sennacherib prism. This is a clay tablet shaped like a prism. And on it, page 138 in the Zondervan Handbook of Biblical Archaeology by Price and House, it tells the story behind this. Basically, Sennacherib, the Assyrian king, says he has Hezekiah shut up like a bird in his cage in Jerusalem. And he tells about all of his military feats, destroying all these cities in Israel, but glaringly missing from his own account is his overtaking and destroying Jerusalem itself, which he does not do because, according to the biblical text, 185,000 of his people are killed by the angel of the Lord. And this prism is in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and was found in 1830 by the British Colonel Taylor. So it's also called the Taylor prism. And it was actually found at Nineveh. Then, of course, you have Hezekiah's tunnel as well. Again, story given in the biblical text. So you've got the support of the Davidic dynasty, also through other archaeological findings, biblical texts, manuscripts, inscriptions, bullae. So we come now to the Solomonic temple. And the scripture says, "Now it came about in the 480th year after the sons of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. As for the house which King Solomon built for the Lord, its length was 60 cubits, and its width 20 cubits, and its height 30 cubits." 1 Kings chapter 6. And there you have the dimensions and the whole account of the building of the temple under the leadership of King Solomon. And the layouts and dimensions are given in the biblical text quite clearly. Even these pillars out front were each given a name on either side of the front door. You have the basin, the wash basin, the laver sitting on bronze bulls pointing in different directions. I think there were 12 of those. You have the altar outside, and it was a ramp to go up to that. And then inside that front door on either side was the menorah. And then on one side was the table of showbread, the bread of the presence, 12 loaves baked, put there fresh each day. That was at least the way it's supposed to be done in the tabernacle. And then inside, the temple did have, there's a rear compartment like the tabernacle, a rear compartment which was called the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies, in which only the high priest could enter, and that just once a year. And you can, if you want to see the whole connection of all this stuff about the temple and Jerusalem and why that matters to Christians, go to the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. Ties it all together for you in one big, nice bow. Jesus Christ is the high priest. Look at Hebrews chapter 7. Read it. Read Hebrews chapter 8. He is the fulfillment of the new covenant, Jeremiah's new covenant, Jeremiah 31. Read chapters 9 and 10 of Hebrews. You will see that Jesus Christ is, he's the antitype, the fulfillment of all the typology, the pictures, the foreshadowing, all these things in the Old Testament, the prophecies. He's the fulfillment. Okay? Hebrews 9:10 even goes into such details to mention the utensils used in the temple sacrifices and the tabernacle. He used a lot of tabernacle language there. So there's the connection for you. This is Bible, man. And so that's what stood here on where this gold dome building now stands. It was the temple to God. Then there's the destruction. Now on the 7th day of the 5th month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He burned the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, even every great house he burned with fire. 2 Kings 25, 8 and 9. Then they burned the house of God and broke down the wall of Jerusalem and burned all its fortified buildings with fire and destroyed all its valuable articles. 2 Chronicles 36:19. You might ask, why? Why did God allow his house to be burned? In one sense, it's really quite simple. God had warned his chosen people, his covenant people, the Jews with whom he had a special relationship. He had warned them about their idolatry, their hard-headedness, and their chasing after other gods and not putting him first and giving him priority in their lives, and the way they treated people around them. Basically, the way they revered or respected God and obeyed him or not. And God sent prophet after prophet after prophet to warn them, I am going to bring down your enemies on you if you don't repent. Turn from these sins. Turn from your idolatry. So God brought the heat, literally and metaphorically. And that is why the enemies of the Jews were allowed and are still allowed today ultimately to overtake the Jews, to be a burr under their saddle. Back to the Numbers passage, they will be pricks for you. They will, Numbers 33 passage we looked at earlier, they are going to be burrs under your saddles. They're going to continue to create problems for you. Okay, so the Jews disobeyed God at the time. God allowed their enemies to overtake them and to create continual problems for them. And that continues to happen today even. These are biblical lessons you pick up from the biblical text. You have but to read it. So the Babylonians are allowed to come and destroy the temple there in Jerusalem off of that Temple Mount. The Babylonians come. They really come in like three waves, 605, 597, I think, and then 586. They destroy the temple. They take tens of thousands of Jews as hostages back to Babylon, and time goes on, 7 decades. God had warned the Jews through Jeremiah the prophet that 70 years is how long this captivity is going to go on. This hostage crisis for you, 70 years. And so it was. And then God, through his providence and his power, even the pagan wicked king Cyrus, who had taken over later, the Persian, you had Nebuchadnezzar the Babylonian, Darius the Mede, Cyrus the Persian, and then you had, of course, the Greeks under Alexander, and then the Romans under Julius Caesar, and then the other emperors, Octavian, Tiberius, and so forth. At any rate, under God's providence, his power, his great plan, his working things out, he put it into the mind of Cyrus to allow these Jews to go back. Then when Nehemiah, who's a Jew, and he's in captivity and exile, serving, working in the cabinet of the administrative cabinet of the king, he's the cupbearer. And one morning he brings the cup of coffee to the guy, okay, just sort of ad hoc scenarios, sort of adding in between the lines here. Brings his cup of coffee, and he says, "Hey, Nehemiah, you're looking really down in the mouth, son. What's going on with you?" Nehemiah says, "Well, sir, my temple to my God and my home city lies in ruins, and I'm just really burdened about it," right? And so Artaxerxes writes a decree that the Jews can return and rebuild, and so they do. So the Jews return and rebuild, and they begin the rebuilding process. Read the book of Ezra and Nehemiah to talk about all the goings on there, okay? But then it's not long before Ezra 3, verses 8 and 9. Now in the second year of their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem in the second month, Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and the rest of their brothers, the priests and Levites, all came from the captivity to Jerusalem and began the work, and appointed the Levites from 20 years old and older to oversee the work of the house of the Lord. So they rebuilt. The decree was sent by the non-Jewish pagan king, and so the people started collecting the donations and getting the help together and began the rebuild process. Okay, a few hundred years go on again, and fast forward to the time of Herod the Great. Now the Romans rule the empire. Rome has installed Herod the Great, he's called, son of Antipater. And Herod the Great is a whole unique figure in world history. He's one of my favorite to study. I've written about him. I've researched him a lot. He and his sons are really the backdrop to the four Gospels and the book of Acts in a huge way. At any rate, he refurbishes the temple that was rebuilt under Zerubbabel, and he expands the walls and the temple courtyard to the 35 acres it is today. Now, I want to share something really cool with you. You notice these colonnaded porches around the inside of the temple walls. Well, we'll come back to that. You can read in Josephus about Herod's stonemasons and the workers he got to build this huge retaining wall around the Temple Mount and to fill it in, and just to create this massive, largest Temple Mount in the world, in the ancient world. And you can see here where the temple would stand over the actual rock that, again, is underneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The major feats, again, is these workers. Josephus explains to us, and we have found, you can go in the Western Wall tunnel. If you get a chance to go to Jerusalem, you really need to try to go in the Western Wall tunnel. I've been down in there before, because when you're standing at the Wailing Wall and you're standing on that plaza at the Wailing Wall, you're standing at the wall, facing the wall, the stones underneath your feet, well, that wall in front of you goes another 50 or more feet below the street, the plaza you're standing on. You have to go in that Western Wall tunnel, and you'll be taken down in there. And what you find there are the massive, massive stones. Quite an engineering feat for Herod, but he was good at that, actually. This is called the Western Stone. It's the largest stone found so far. It's at the bottom, sort of northwest corner of the retaining wall of the Temple Mount. And this one single stone measured, now not all of them, this is the largest one, but there are some that are still 8 or 9 feet tall, 20 feet long, 8 feet thick. This one is 45 feet long, if you can even imagine, one stone. 45 feet long, I think it's 8 or 9 feet, 11 feet tall and 8 feet thick, something roughly around those dimensions. Amazing. That helps hold in, it's a retaining wall to hold in. Herod filled in around the temple and expanded the plaza, the platform. You can read about that in Josephus. And so that stone wall that stone you just saw would be down over, it's down below here. The Wailing Wall is back over here, down below, and this is down below that northwest corner. Okay, this is the eastern gate here. This is the southeastern pinnacle, southwestern area where Robinson's Arch is over down on this side of the wall. We'll see shortly. And here that is. So here's an image of a drawing. You can go to get some great images like this from Rittmeyer Archaeological Design. And you see, because Josephus describes this, so artists have gone by what he says, the historical record says, and what's left of archaeology today to sort of piece this together. And quite accurately, quite clearly, this is the case. But underneath here, you see the street here, and you can walk on these ruins today and walk down this street today. And you see this arch over the street that holds the walkway that comes down over here, and this leads up into the temple. But just a little corner right here of this arch, it's called Robinson's Arch, discovered by an archaeologist in the 1800s, discovered by an archaeologist. And it's still sticking out of the side of the wall today. Part of the arch, you see it right here. This is Robinson's Arch. And you can stand right down here and look up and see the arch, what's left of it. And the Al-Aqsa Mosque is right up here, and the Gold Dome is over here about 300 yards or so, something roughly like that, okay? All right, let's think about Jesus and the Temple Mount then, shall we? Jesus and the Temple Mount. The temple and the Temple Mount played a major role in Jesus' life. This is from DannyTheDigger.com. Jesus was presented to the Lord as a baby in front of this temple, and at age 12, he remained there for 3 days having debates with teachers. As an adult, Jesus overturned the tables of the money changers at the temple and argued with the Pharisees. John 10, when Jesus died, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, Matthew 27. And as he has prophesied, Luke 19:40, 1941 and following, the temple was eventually destroyed. So that's a relationship basically of Jesus and the temple. All right, John 10, this is really cool. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico. Remember a few moments ago I mentioned these colonnaded sections along the walls, along the inner walls of Herod's temple. These are where people would set up shop rabbis would gather their students, disciples together to teach. People would set up shop for the selling the doves and the sheep for the sacrifices during the time of the great festivals. Jesus was here. It says that Jesus was there at Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication. So Jesus was there as a good Jew celebrating Hanukkah, and it's in that context because the menorah are out in the courtyard lighting up the night sky in the evenings and so forth. And it's in that context that Jesus says, I am the light of the world. He who comes to me will not walk in darkness. Further in John 2:20, the Jews said it took 46 years to build this temple. Will you raise it up in 3 days? Okay, Jesus is here in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount in the courtyard discussing with the Jewish leaders. He says, destroy this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. John has to comment, hey, he was referring to the temple of his body, that he would come back to life in 3 days. But they said, look, we've been working on this thing for 46 years, right? Josephus explains to us that Herod the Great started the refurbishing project in about roughly 20 to 21, 22 BC. And so 46 years, so that gives you pretty close to the exact year of the time Jesus is standing there talking to these guys. Jesus' relationship also to the Temple Mount is he warns the Jews in Luke 21, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. Now, that's probably a double fulfillment there, because Zechariah 14 mentions that God is going to gather all nations to Jerusalem to battle, and the Messiah will return. Jesus Christ will return, and he'll go up onto that Temple Mount again and do business with his enemies and set up his kingdom and so forth. So he'll be back to that Temple Mount. But he did warn against the destruction, which most Bible scholars see at least partial fulfillment filled in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed the temple. And again, that's covered by Josephus. It was destroyed by Vespasian and Titus. They tore the temple down. They set it on fire. Josephus said, the gold gilt on decorations on things melted and ran down. And the fire got so hot, it was just horrendous. They threw the stones down. Jesus said, not one stone of this temple will be left standing. So you see at the base of the Temple Mount walls today, you can actually see part of these stones still piled up on the road below. Some of those are here and here. The destruction of the Jerusalem temple by the Jewish temple by the Romans is covered on the Arch of Titus, and you see a depiction of the menorah on that as well. Famous scene there. And so the area lay in ruins for centuries. the area, it lay in desolation to one degree or another until the 7th century, when the Muslims conquered and built the octagonal dome, which actually is a Byzantine design, the Dome of the Rock on the site where Solomon's temple had been. Now, some will ask, so why did the Muslims build a dome there? Well, it was, part of it was maybe to compete with other sectarian groups. I'm not sure on that, but part of the tradition is Muhammad had his night journey there from that rock, the rock that's inside there. So they built this. The whole area, you need to understand this. At the south end of the temple is this little black dome building, a much larger, long, rectangular building. That's called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But the whole area, including the Dome of the Rock, the whole Temple Mount, is referred to as Al-Aqsa because it simply means in Arabic the furthest or the farthest. And what that means is next to Mecca and Medina, it's the farthest one from those areas. But according to their tradition, Muhammad was here, and he had his famous night journey. And so they built the Dome of the Rock building here to commemorate that. That's why it's there. There are probably more political reasons as to why it was built and is maintained there as well. Now, the floor on the Temple Mount that you go on and in which thousands of Muslims kneel and pray during Ramadan and whatever, but this floor here is actually Herodian. A lot of these stones are still Herodian stones laid down that were there in the 1st century. So that's pretty interesting. This image here is on the Temple Mount. All right, so the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary it's called, is the site of Muhammad's ascent to heaven in the 7th century. Today, the mount is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam, and the gold-topped Dome of the Rock, one of the most recognizable symbols of Jerusalem today. The Dome of the Rock was built here, and here's an older picture of it. The gold on it was placed there or reworked just, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 years ago. So it hasn't always looked exactly like it does now. They've touched it up a couple times in the last 30, 40 years. Anyways, the point. Okay, so where have we come so far? Abraham was promised the land, and then several hundred years later, Joshua brings the Israelites into the land. God commands them to oust the Canaanites. The Jews don't do a very good job of doing what they're supposed to do. God gives the city to David and the Jews, and David actually purchases the Temple Mount, as we call it now. He purchases that mountain from Arona the Jebusite. And then his son Solomon builds the temple. It's destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. It's rebuilt by Zerubbabel 70-some years later. The temple is refurbished, and the Temple Mount platform is expanded by Herod the Great in the 1st century BC, about the time of Christ. Then the temple on the Temple Mount is destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. Then in the 7th century, the Muslims come take over the property and build the Dome of the Rock building on that location. And then the Ottoman Turks, another group of Muslims, take over in into the 15th century, I think it is. And for a few hundred years, they have control till the British take control. They give the land to the Jews in 1948. And then I haven't got this far yet, but here we go. Now that brings us up to 1967. There's the 6-Day War. Jerusalem takes control totally of Jerusalem, even the Temple Mount, but they give control back to the Muslims. The Temple Mount property, that 35 acres, that top of that mount, they give it back to the Muslims for control. Well, they've sort of tried to have dual control over it, but there's always clashes and killings and riots and things that happen up there, even till this very day. You know, the dual sovereignty over it doesn't seem to have worked very well. But anyway, that's where we are currently. But let's fill in some more detail, shall we? The construction of Al-Aqsa Mosque, the furthest mosque in 715, some sources say 705, cemented the status of the Temple Mount as a holy site for Muslims. He mentions Saladin retaking the mount so the Crusaders overtook it. Saladin retook it from the Crusaders. Suleiman was overthrown, and the Ottoman Empire took control of the Temple Mount. All right, so first of all, you see the time frame real quickly here from the Roman period to the Byzantine period, and then the first Muslim period. Then the Crusaders had it for 80 years or so. The Ayyubid period, Muslims again, Saladin. The Mamluks for a few hundred years. Then the Ottomans had it for about 400 years. And then the British Mandate from 1917 to 1948. City was divided until 1967. Then the reunification happened. But at that time, Israel gave control of the Temple Mount back to the Muslims. On the second day of 1967 Six-Day War, the IDF captured Jerusalem. The Temple Mount is in our hands, declared Colonel Mordecai Gur. In liberating the Temple Mount, the Jewish people reclaimed control of the area for the first time since the destruction of the Second Temple. Initially, the chief rabbi, who had been with the troops, blew the shofar on the Temple Mount, set up a synagogue and office there. Moshe Dayan, the defense minister, had made some comments, seemed to be for it, but then, as it says here, largely out of fear of igniting a holy war with the Muslims, Dayan reversed his position, and Goren was ordered to cease his activities. On June 17, 1967, a meeting was held at Al-Aqsa between Dayan and the Muslim religious authorities of Jerusalem, reformulating the status quo. Jews were given the right to visit the Temple Mount unobstructed and free of charge if they respected Muslims' religious feelings and acted decently, but they were not allowed to pray. The Western Wall was to remain the Jewish place of prayer. Religious sovereignty was to remain with the Muslims, while overall sovereignty became Israeli. Dayan's offer was objected to by the Muslims as they rejected the Israeli conquest of Jerusalem and the Mount. Some Jews, led by Rabbi Goren, objected as well, claiming the decision handed over the complex to the Muslims and argued that the Western Wall's holiness is derived from the Mount and symbolizes exile, while praying on the Mount represents freedom and the return of Jewish people to their homeland. So this went on for years. Jews could go up there, but they could not pray. Then there were times when the police would forbid Jews from praying on the Temple Mount. They have been forbidden to go up there sometimes. And actually, this has led over time to a lot of flare-ups on the Temple Mount and around the Temple Mount and in the city of Jerusalem because of the tensions between the Muslims who control the Temple Mount, that 35-acre piece of real estate, and the Jews in Jerusalem that live there and whose nation sovereignly has ultimate control over it. But, there's these dealings where the Muslims can have the Temple Mount just as long as you let people go up there peacefully. It just creates tensions. It just does. And this newsreel here is actually from about 5 years ago.
Conflict on the Temple Mount erupted again this week on Tuesday, despite Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian officials supposedly reaching an understanding over the religious holy site. But dozens of Palestinians again tried to force their way into the restricted Golden Gate site at the Temple Mount complex, sparking yet another round of clashes with police. And as a result, 19 Palestinians were reportedly arrested, and several more were lightly wounded, including Nasser Kos, a senior Fatah party official. But there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye. The Golden Gate area, also known as the Gate of Mercy, has been closed by court order since 2003, following years of illegal Palestinian construction that many believe was intended to destroy Jewish antiquities and other historical artifacts at the site. Further, the organization managing the renovations in the area at the time was found to be connected to the Hamas terror group, and literally thousands of artifacts have since been found in the 9,000 tons of dirt that was illegally removed and thrown away by what has become known now as the Temple Mount Sifting Project. But starting last Thursday, Jordanian Waqf officials, who oversee the Temple Mount in a decades-old agreement, held their first council meeting on the Temple Mount in front of the Golden Gate before holding prayer services in the restricted area too. Then on Monday, the Waqf again mobilized Palestinians at the gate, where they broke into the closed parts of the complex, sparking renewed clashes with police and ultimately the closure of the entire Temple Mount complex for around 3 hours.
And so these conflicts happen all the time in Israel. There's clashes between the Muslims and the Jews in regards to the Temple Mount. And when Jews go up there, especially in larger groups, it's referred to as the flooding of Al-Aqsa, and it's seen as provocation by the Muslims who react, and this causes this friction back and forth, all because of this 35-acre piece of real estate. The epicenter of the world, Ezekiel 5:5, right? All right, as we said, in 1967, there was reunification of the city of Jerusalem. Now, what happened sometime after that, and this is the cover of Lean and Kathleen Rittmeyer's Secrets of Jerusalem's Temple Mount. The one in the center is the older book. The one on the right is a newer, updated edition. I'll put a link to those in my affiliate link in the description below. But I do highly recommend Rittmeyer's book. I highly recommend Geisler and Holden's book on the Handbook of Bible and Archaeology, and the Zondervan Handbook of Biblical Archaeology by Price and House. Highly recommend those if you want to see how archaeology and the Bible connect, especially as regards to the city of Jerusalem and the finds there that demonstrate the establishment of the Jewish nation 3 millennia ago, even before that, and how the biblical narrative from the prophets, from the writings of the Old Testament and the prophets, and then the Gospels and New Testament, how those are all corroborated by the archaeological finds there in and around the city of Jerusalem, and really throughout the land, up from Tel Dan, for instance. All right, so let's talk about a pilgrimage. Let's talk about pilgrimages today to the land of Israel, specifically the city of Jerusalem, and what you can find there. As I said, I was there last in 2023, and in June, so just before the October 7 Hamas war. It is a beautiful city if you like old stuff and you like religion and history. When you go into what's now a state park, a national park, if you go into the park at the southern end of the Temple Mount walls, there is this warning here. It says, according to Torah law, entering the Temple Mount area is strictly forbidden due to the holiness of the site. Now, they don't enforce that, but it's there. And then you look along the southern wall here, and these are the things that you will find. There is a model of the temple that sits out in the little museum before you walk in there, if you'd like to check that out. There's an aerial map as well, or aerial view of the Temple Mount. Okay, I'm standing on the walkway that goes up where non-Muslims can enter the Temple Mount, and looking down onto the Wailing Wall. And in fact, at the very bottom of the screen here, there's like a wooden fence or something if you look carefully at the bottom. And so just to closer to the walkway that you're standing at, then you can look down, and this is where the women gather to pray. And you see a couple ladies down there praying at this portion of the Wailing Wall. But what you're left with there are the ruins of the 70 destruction, and the stones below you can see are still lying there, as I mentioned before, and some of that can be seen here. You can also see my video, Israel Part 5 Jerusalem, to check out some of those pictures I took. Okay, when you get up on the Temple Mount, you will go by this first little building here, and you'll see some of these Corinthian capitals stacked up here. These are very ancient from previous buildings and part of Herodian architecture from the Temple Mount, actually. Then you'll come to the doors of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was mentioned in the news clip a moment ago. I've actually been inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's been some years, many years actually, but we did not go inside of it last year. We did walk by the front of it. It was not crowded at all the day we were there. But this is the Al-Aqsa Mosque at the southern end of the Temple Mount with the small black dome on it, not the gold dome building, which is a shrine. Here's the front of the mosque, and you see how huge the platform is. Now, if you look straight out the door of that, you're looking, and it's probably, 300 yards, I would guess, straight across is the Dome of the Rock. But you'll see this fountain is in between there. First, there are seats around it. You come by this fountain, I guess, for washing or whatever. It says the water's not for drinking, I think. And then you ascend the stairs to the Dome of the Rock. And it does get crowded up there sometimes. It's a huge area. As you saw in the news clips, thousands, probably tens of thousands of people could crowd up here and fit in here together for prayer or whatever they might do up here, okay? All right, here's the Dome of the Rock. And we walk around this huge plaza, just checking out the scenery, just sort of feeling the history, checking out the beauty, the ornate nature of these buildings, the antiquity of these buildings, the fact that, Jesus was here on this Temple Mount. This is where the great temple stood. Some of these stones you walk on are Herodian. Therefore, they were here in the first century as well. Here's just a little video clip of walking around up there, checking out these stones we're walking on. And there, you're looking at the inside, just over the top of the short bushes there. You see what looks like two little domes. And just below that are the golden arches of the inside of the eastern gate. Just to show you where those are. Hopefully you can see those. And this gate, as you can see from here to here, is thick. It's a huge gate system, but it is inside the eastern gate there. This is, we're standing on the north side of the building. As you come out on the northwest wall or gate, I guess it is. You come out and you see how the buildings are built on the stone. We saw the Al-Aqsa Clinic, emergency clinic, first aid clinic, whatever, urgent care. Came right by that. And you come out on the Via Dolorosa, as you see on the street sign up here. And there were shops there. They were selling things like little crowns of thorns. They were selling fruit, selling shirts. All right, and finally you see, again, the model of the temple, this second temple, and you see the colonnades there, and this is reminiscent of things you see in the Gospels. Finally, the future. Jesus mentions the future in Luke 21. Again, along with Zechariah 14, Jerusalem will be surrounded by armies one day. Know that her desolation is near, okay? That's just going to happen. But the Lord will come back at that time to defend his beloved people and to finish out his plan and to carry out his plan. Ezekiel 40 through 48, those last 9 chapters of Ezekiel, do talk about another temple that will be built at some point in time on the Temple Mount. So the Lord Jesus Christ will return to this piece of real estate when he comes back. Zechariah 14, first few verses mention that. Zechariah 12, verse 10 says, "And they will look on me whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns over an only son." And Jesus stood on this hill I'm standing on when I took this picture, actually, and he wept over this city. Luke 19:41 and following, if you had known, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I would have gathered you as a chicken, a hen does her young ones under her wings. If you'd only known I was going to be here this day, but you wouldn't have me. You rejected me, right? And he wept over the city there at that point. But he's going to come back there one day. That's the teaching of the Bible, clear teaching of the Bible. He is the Alpha and Omega. He is Christ. He will have the last word. This is the teaching of the Bible, and I'm the Bible professor. Be blessed. Bye-bye. Hey, if my videos are helpful or encouraging to you at all whatsoever, please share them with someone else, okay? You can subscribe, share, support in the links below, but please do share them, and so others can, get some of this Bible teaching and be encouraged and edified, challenged, discipled by it, whatever the need may be, okay? All right, thank you. Bye-bye.